Hi, today I want to talk about object-oriented programming. This is a fundamental concept that you'll get to before you take on data structures and algorithms, and it's kind of after you got the bare bones syntax for your first language. And not only is this important, today I'll be demonstrating this in Java, but this applies to other areas of software development, including maybe the front end, how components in a JavaScript framework, such as React, how do they architect their components. So it's not quite object-oriented on the front end side, but once you learn this, it'll be much easier to grasp how things are organized in other areas. So the dictionary definition, object-oriented programming, it's a type of software design where data structures model after objects. You can have relationships between objects, and objects can inherit objects from another object. And kind of to make that simpler, we try to write code, design it in a way that mimics how real world objects, how they work. So for example, a neighborhood might have a lot of houses, and a house might have a bathroom, a kitchen, and how do they relate to each other, and how do they work in software so that we can build code that can do that appropriately. So let's just jump right into a simple example. So I'm going to demonstrate these concepts on a thermometer and code as I explain, because it'll probably be a bit easier to talk and apply to the code right away. So in an object, the three core learnings are the three parts of an object are fields, constructors, and methods. So what are your typical characteristics of a thermometer? What's the current temperature? What's the brand? Those are like fields. Those are what uniquely separates or uniquely identifies this thermometer from another thermometer. The constructor is the blueprint for how you create an object. So again, you ask hey, what brand of thermometer it is, what's the current temperature. So whenever someone wants to create a thermometer, they know how to in code. And methods, this is how you interact or use an object. And we'll explain the two different types of methods, but why don't we jump right in and write some field for this thermometer. So a thermometer takes a temperature. So why don't we just have a value to keep track of the current temperature? So that's how you initialize a field. And then the constructor, again, we said it's a blueprint for how to create an object. So the way you do a constructor is you say public thermometer, and then if it has any parameters that we need to pass, then you would put it in here. So let's just say when we want to create a thermometer, you need to set what the current temperature is, and that's how it will start working. So I'll say current temp, and to initialize the thermometer, we're going to say this.current temp equals current temp. I'm going to move this over to the right side. So we are kind of manufacturing or designing what this object is going to look like and how it's going to behave, while on this side in sample file, we will be creating and we're being the client, and we're consuming and using the thermometer. So based on this constructor on the left side, I'm going to make a thermometer. So how I do is thermometer, the type, the name, the variable name equals new thermometer. And because this constructor takes in a variable int, so I'm going to pass in what the current temperature is. So I'm going to say 80 for now. So what this does is now this thermometer is a new instance of, it's like we went to the thermometer factory and we passed in 80 degrees, and now we have our own thermometer right here. We basically use this constructor to know how to make the thermometer. And so now that we have a thermometer, let's try to interact with thermometer more. So there are two types of methods. There are getters and setters. Getters retrieve values from an object, and usually you retrieve it from a field. So I'm going to make one called get current temp, and what this does is it just returns this.current temp. So we're going to return an int, it's going to retrieve the field from the object. And so, yeah, it's going to return the field. It's going to return the current temp. So if I do int current temp equals thermometer dot get current temp, and I do system.out dot print current temp, since I set it to 80, I'm going to get 80. What do we think we're going to get? We're going to get 80. Perfect. So this is an example of a getter. Now a setter method is when you assign or change values pertaining to an object. Usually there's more complex logic. That's how you really interact with an object. So setter down here, I'm going to do public and set current temp. And what this is going to take in a new temperature that we want to apply to the thermometer. So since this variable current temp is what we're using to keep track of our temperature, I'm going to do this got current temp equals new temp. And what that does is it's going to change the current temperature. It's going to change this thermometer's temperature from 80 to whatever I pass in. So if I do thermometer dot set current temp, and then I'm going to change it to 60, just kidding, 50. Then if I do, let's say I'm going to copy this line again. I'm going to copy it, move it down. I'm going to call this new temp. Honestly, let's just make this void. So I'm not going to return anything. It's just going to change it and not return anything. Then I'm going to system.out.println. I'm going to do thermometer dot get current temp again. So really, I'm just going to call get current temp again after I change it to 50. So let's go ahead and play it. So it first was 80, and now it's 50. If we can debug really quickly. So I'm going to click debug. And so at first, we're going to step over. So the thermometer has a current temp of 80. We're going to do int current temp and get it. Now the current temp is 80. And then I'm going to print it. It became, if I go to the console here, we get 80. And then I'm going to set the current temp. And now you notice inside the thermometer, the current temp is now 50. And then after I step over, I'm going to print out, and then now it's 50. So that's a really quick summary of fields, constructors, and methods in an object. Now, I want to keep this short, so in the next video, I'll explain why we have getters and setters. Like, why don't we just refer to these private fields? How do we throw errors, or how do we prevent people from, like, what if we have a current temperature that we want to make sure that the air conditioning is, if this is not a thermometer object, if it's an air conditioning object, we want to make sure the range is from 60 to 80. How do we prevent the client or the user from setting the temperature to 40 degrees, for example? So, all right, thank you. See you next time.